Hi there, I'm Michelle the Painter from Berkshire Paint and Sip, and this is Paint and Sip at Home. Alright, so today we're going to be painting cherry blossom lanterns, and I'm going to be sipping on a little Cabernet. And if you enjoy this video, I do hope that you like and subscribe to my channel, and that you also check out my Patreon page where you're going to find additional painting perks. So let's get painting and let's get sipping. Alright, so what I'm going to be using for my materials today is a stretched and primed 16 by 20 inch canvas. If you're painting along with me, you can certainly switch up the size, but that's what I'll be using. I'm going to be using acrylic paint today. My colors are titanium white, cobalt blue, burnt umber, which I'll call brown, green oxide, deep yellow, Mars black, and fire red. And of course you can switch up those colors, but that's what I'll be using. For my tools today, I have a standard number 2 pencil, and then I have 3 brushes. I have a 1/2 inch wide flat bristle brush, I have a number 8 round brush, and I have a number 1 round brush, and I will refer to these as small, medium, and large as we go through the painting process. And of course you could switch those up as well if you'd like to. If you're painting along with me, you'll probably want to have a cup of water for washing your brushes, as well as a paper towel for drying them. And down below this video, I will be providing you with a couple of additional resources that can help you through your painting process. One of them is a link where you could purchase the same exact paint kit that I'm using, from the large canvas to, you know, the fancy foam palette and all that good stuff, and paint and brushes. So that's down there for you. There's also a link where you can download a free image of the final painting. So you can print that and use it as visual reference as you go through the painting process. And there's also written step-by-step instructions down there for you as well. And that's all we're going to need today. Alright, so what we're going to do for the first step is we are going to be drawing an outline for our distant hills. So I'm going to be using my pencil, and this can certainly be a free-form type of step for you. If you want your mountains to be more pointy or more rolly, feel free to make these however you want. I'm going to have mine kind of just gentle and off in the distance, and they're just going to be a nice backdrop for the painting itself. So I'm going to give myself a couple of markers on the left side and on the right side, and I'll connect those markers, and if you want to follow along with where those markers are, great. If not, make your own places to put them. So on the right hand side, I'm going to come down a little bit farther than halfway. So visually for me, this is about my halfway point, and I'm just going to come down maybe about another inch from there and make myself a mark. On the left hand side, I'm going to make myself about 3 marks. The first one is going to be about 1/4 of the way up my canvas, and to know where that is, if you visually kind of pick your halfway point, somewhere between there and the bottom of your canvas is about your 1/4 way mark. So I'll make myself a mark here. Then I'm going to come down maybe about 2 inches, make another mark, then maybe about another inch and make myself another mark. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make 2 marks at the bottom of my canvas. One of them is going to be in maybe 3 or 4 inches. So I've got a little bit of a marker in through here. And then the other one, if this is about my halfway point, I'm coming to the right of that a couple of inches. And again, these are just imaginative hills. I've created them in my own mind, so if you want yours different than mine, that's great. So the first 2 marks that I'm going to connect are the second one down here and the one over here. This is going to be my main kind of rolly hill that I'm going to go for. So I'm going to just make myself a gentle roly-poly hill that's coming down in through here. Maybe I've got this one coming up a little bit, and I've got another little roll going in through here. And of course you can certainly make yours whatever way you want. It doesn't have to be exactly like mine. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this marker and I'm going to connect it to about here. So I'm going to just take this and make myself a little bit of a hill in through here. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a hill with these bottom 2 markers. that are at the bottom of my canvas. So I'm coming up a little bit like this and then just down over like that. And you can see I'm just sketching these. I don't want them to be perfect. And then I'm going to take this last line and I'm going to connect it to around here with just another little hill. And that's all I'm going to do for my outline of my hills. I'm going to use my large brush for the next step. So once you've got these on here, you can put your pencil away, take out your large brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we are painting our sky. I'm going to be using my large bristle brush and I'm going to be using blue and white paint. I'm going to start with both colors on my brush at the same time, and I'm going to be using like a long, almost crisscross type motion to get my sky on here. I'm not using a lot of pressure. I am using a good amount of paint so it spreads nice for me. And what I'm going to do is as I come down my sky, I'm going to get it lighter and lighter. So the next time I picked up paint, I just picked up white. Well, I had a little bit of blue too because it was on my palette, but more white than blue the next time I picked up paint. And as I come down my sky, I might never pick up blue again. So that way what'll happen, because I'm using a dirty paintbrush, the paint or the darker blue will work its way off of my brush and my sky will get lighter and lighter as it comes down my canvas. And I'm using this crisscross type motion to give it almost the illusion of some soft clouds that are floating by. You might want yours lighter or darker than mine. You might want yours to have more of an appearance of clouds, which you could do some lighter spots. And you'll notice that I probably, most of the time what I do is I crisscross back over into a previous section that I did. And the reason why I'm doing that is so they look like they belong together. If you just continually keep moving down the canvas and don't go back into the previous section, what might end up happening is you might end up with the appearance of almost sections of colors. So if you want them to look like they belong together, you do want them to kind of overlap with one another. So you'll find that my brush definitely goes back into a previous section as it's drying. I get those colors to kind of blend in a little bit more with one another. And again, if you wanted more blue, if you found that your paint went too light too quickly, you can certainly pick up a little bit more blue to accentuate that color of the sky. But I'm going for a sky that is just a beautiful spring day with lots and lots of sunshine in it. So I am making sure that I have it on the brighter and lighter side. So especially down towards that horizon, because when I look out into the sky and I look at the horizon, I usually notice that it gets lighter as it goes down towards the horizon, wherever that may be. If it's hills or if it's mountains or if it's the sea, it always seems to get lighter to me visually as it goes down there. And then we are going to be using this same brush for the next step. So once you've got your beautiful sky on here, you can wash and dry this large brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're painting our distant hills. I'm going to be using my large bristle brush, and the colors that I'm using are mostly white, but I'm also going to use blue, brown, and green as well. So I want these mountains or hills to look like they're way far off in the distance. So when we look out into an actual landscape, the farther away things are from us, the less we are able to detect the colors that are in them. So they look more muted and saturated or unsaturated. So if I want this hill to look the farthest away, it's going to be the dullest in color. If I want these to look like they're closer to me, they're going to have more distinct colors to them, like the greens and the browns. So how I'm going to do this is I'm going to start with my furthest away hill, which will be this one, and I'm going to work my way towards the front hills. I'm going to be using really muted colors, especially in these back two, and then which will be brown, blue, and white, but mostly white. And as I work my way into these two, I'll start incorporating a little bit of green and brown, more green and brown than the blue and the white. So you'll see how I'm going to do this. I am going to have each hill a little bit darker at the top than it is at the bottom, and that's just going to give you added visual dimension to it. So I'm starting with mostly white on my brush, and I won't use a lot of paint on my brush during this process, and a little bit of blue, so you can see that there. And I'm going to start with this hill in through here, and I'm going to bring it right up to my pencil mark. And again, it doesn't need to be very evident or visible on top of your sky at this point, because it is so far off in the distance. We just want this to be really just a subtle effect in through here. And then as I get down towards the bottom of it, I'm using a little bit more white on my brush, so it gets a little bit lighter as it is meeting that next hill. And again, I'm not using much paint at all. I just really want it to look a little bit darker at the top, very muted off in the distance. I'm not going to wash my brush, but for the next hill, I'm picking up blue, brown, and white all at the same time on my brush. And I'm going to start at this little tippy top, just to give myself a little bit of that darker color that I'm desiring up at the top. And then if you feel like you have too much paint on your brush, you can always just wipe it off on your paper towel. I felt like I had a little bit too much color on my brush, so I just wiped it off. And now what I'm going to do, since I have that darker silhouette at the top, is I am just utilizing the remnants on my brush to work my way down towards the bottom of that hill. And again, I'm not using much paint at all. I do want it to be a little bit darker at the top, so I'm using a little bit more blue and brown on my brush at the top. And it does not have to be a solid, consistent color at the top either. You can certainly have some spots that are a little darker than others, some that are a little more brown than blue, some that have, you know, a little bit more excitement in them, but you definitely want it to get a little bit lighter as it comes down towards the bottom of that particular section of the hill. So you could use a crisscross motion. I'm just kind of rubbing it at this point because I don't want to have a lot of paint on there. So I am just using very little bit of paint, which causes me to use almost like a dry brush type rubbing effect. And then once I've got this hill, this is looking pretty good to me. Once I've got this hill, I'm going to move on to the ones that are a little bit more in focus, but I'm just making sure my pencil marks are hidden at this point too, at the top of that hill. I want to make sure that these colors look like they belong together and blend together, so I don't want there to be necessarily distinct sections. And again, this is just an off in the distance little bit of information that we're adding to the painting. Now on this section, I'm going to be using my same colors, blue, brown, and white, and I'm going to incorporate a tiny bit of green also on my brush for this particular hill. So this is going to start to get it to be a little bit more in focus because I'm using green in my painting mixture. And again, very little bit of paint on my brush. And now I'm just going to go ahead and paint it in, making sure that I've got it a little bit lighter as it comes down towards the bottom of that hill. Again, it doesn't have to be super duper light, but just a little bit lighter as it comes down will definitely make it look a little bit more realistic. And then on this one, again, I'm not washing my brush, but I will not pick up any more blue for this one. I'm going to pick up some green and brown to kind of give that little bit of extra in focus colors at the top of it. And I just have this little sliver of a section, so I don't need to do much on this one. Picking up a little bit more white at this point just to get it to go a little bit lighter as it goes down that hill. And then we're going to be using our medium brush for the next step. So once you've got your beautiful distant hills on your canvas, you can put this large brush away, take out your medium brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what I'm going to do for the next step is I am painting my branches. So I'm going to use my medium brush, and I am using black, brown, and white. And for me, I really want these branches to be a nice, focal point. So they're going to occupy a lot of the space on my canvas. I do want them to have a natural looking type element, so I'm going to have them wide at one end and narrow at the others. because for me, when I look at branches on a tree, they're always thicker where they're closer to the trunk. So as they get further towards the end of the branch, they seem to get thinner. So that's the mindset I've got going when I'm going into this. I'm going to have a big, huge one kind of crossing over in through here. I'll have another one coming up in this direction, and then I'll have a cute little one off in this bottom right hand corner. You can certainly put your branches wherever you'd like to. Just when you're planning your branches, if you keep in mind you're going to have these lanterns hanging from them, you want to make sure that you leave a lot of open space in through here so those lanterns can have a nice, can be, you know, kind of the star of the show. So I'm going to start with black and brown on my brush at the same time, and I'm going to kind of plan out where I want them to start on the left hand side. So I'm going to have this big one is going to start somewhere in through this vicinity, and it's going to be really quite wide to start. It's about maybe 1.5 to 2 inches. And then I'll have my other one is going to be coming off this side of my canvas. So I think I'm going to have it coming up in through this vicinity. So that just gives me a good idea of where I'm starting my branches. And again, I'm using black and brown, and I will continue to use both of those colors on my brush at the same time for the making of this particular branch. And then once I've got the branch on there, then I'll start incorporating a little bit of white into it to give more of a realistic three-dimensional type effect to it. And you can have yours pretty dark too. A lot of these trees that I was looking at when I was researching this had very dark branches, and I don't know if it's because of the type of wood or if they're often the branches are kind of overshadowed by all of the beautiful blossoms on the tree. So whatever the case may be, they did have a lot of darkness to some of these branches. So I'm bringing my branch all the way over to the edge of my canvas, and to get these little more narrow ends to it, what I do is I have a lot of paint on my brush, and I don't push hard when I'm towards the end. I actually almost lift off with my brush. So that's how I end up getting these more narrow type branches. And branches can kind of come off in different directions, so don't feel like they always have to come off in the same direction. If you have them coming off in different directions, that makes it look a little bit more natural. And if they cross over one another, some of them can end up looking like they're almost broken. So just have fun with how you create these branches. There are no two branches alike in this world, so definitely have some fun when it comes to creating these. You can see that I'm just enjoying the process myself and making sure that I have enough branches on here so when I do put my beautiful blossoms, I've got some great space for them to just kind of occupy and get the effect that I'm looking for. And I think this is pretty good. I might want maybe 1 or 2 more to hang down a little bit further in through here, just because I know I want a couple of pretty blossoms coming off in through there. So now that I've got that on there, I'm gonna just touch my brush a little bit in the white paint to give myself a couple of little brighter spots just to make it look like there's a little bit of highlight on some of these branches. This works well when the paint is a little wet. If your paint has already dried, you can certainly pick up multiple colors on your brush at the same time. You can use white with a little bit of the brown or the black, but definitely if you can get a little bit of a highlight coming on in through here. I think I want a little branch coming off in through here as well. Something, yeah. Sometimes just adding that little extra branch makes all the difference in the world, at least in my painterly head. I'm going to have this one coming up in through here. So again, I know that I want it nice and thick down at the bottom, and then maybe I'll have a couple branches branching off in this direction and just getting it to be a little bit thinner at the ends of some of these. And again, just have fun with these branches. They don't have to all look exactly the same. It really makes it much more natural if you can have different tonal values, if some of them can be a little bit lighter or darker than others, if you can incorporate a little bit of that lightness with the white like I'm doing now, just to give maybe the look of this branch sitting in front of that branch. That helps to add to that natural illusion of it. And I'm going to have a lantern hanging here, so that's a good branch for that. And then I'm going to add a nice cute little one down in the bottom right hand corner. So again, black and brown are where I'm starting. I'm going to have it a bit wider down at the bottom, and maybe it's just going to kind of come up and kind of wiggle itself around in through here. Yeah, that's looking good. And have a couple of little branches coming off of here. And you can see I'm just having fun with the tip of my brush, getting these little tiny branches to make their way out of the main pack of that particular branch. I'm going to incorporate a tiny bit of white right now, just so I can again get that dimensional element to show its pretty face. And then we're going to use this same brush for the next step. So once you've got your beautiful branches in place, you can wash and dry that medium brush and get ready for the next step. All right. So what we're going to do for the next step is we are drawing an outline for our lanterns. So I'm going to be using my pencil, and we're just going to be making some basic shapes here. So I'm going to be making a circle, an oval, and kind of a soft rectangle for them. You can make them all the same shape. You can make them different sizes. There's bunches of varieties of these paper lanterns. They're lightweight. They come in different colors. They come in different shapes. So feel free to customize yours whatever way that you'd like. I think I'm gonna have 3. So I'm gonna have maybe my oval over here. I think I'll have my rectangle here, and a big circle one in through here. So I'm just going to start drawing my shapes. I'm going to have this one maybe a couple inches above my my land. It's going to cross over my land, and I'm just going to use a sketcherly type of drawing technique. You could certainly, if you had a cup or a plastic lid or something to give yourself a perfect circle, you could certainly go ahead and do that. But this is usually a pretty good method for me to just kind of sketch it on here and kind of keep reshaping it until I feel like it is of a good shape. And that's looking pretty good to me. And if you have a lot of pencil mark around there, you could certainly take your eraser and erase any excess that you have, but the pencil will tend to bleed into the paint anyway, so it'll get disguised during that painting process. But if you have it really thick and you've had to make a ton of corrections, you might want to erase some of the most evident of lines that were not perfect. So that's going to be my circle one. I'm going to have a rectangle one in through here. So I'm going to have 2 vertical lines, maybe about, I don't know, 2 inches away from each other. And then on the top and the bottom, I'm going to have it a little arced. So I'm going to just do a little bit of an arc, something like that. And then on the top, I'll do the same thing, just a little bit of an arc. And again, yours could be straight across. It could be, you know, pointy if you wanted it to, whatever you'd like to do for a shape. I'm going to round these corners just a little bit. And then I'm going to have a little bit of an oval in through here that crosses over my land a little bit. And again, you could have another circle, you could have another rectangle, whatever is visually appealing to you. They could all be the same size. Whatever works for you is good enough. And then we're going to be using our medium brush for the next step. So once you've got your shape of your lantern, the base paper shape of it, you can put your pencil down, take out your medium brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what I'm going to do for the next step is I'm painting the base coat of my lanterns. So I'm going to be using my medium brush, and I'm going to be using red paint. So it's going to be the base coat of the paper part of the lanterns. So medium brush, red paint, and I'm not doing anything fancy here, just making sure that I color all the way to the edge of my pencil mark, so that way I have a nice coverage over it. And some of your red paint will be a little translucent, meaning that you'll be able to see through it. And I don't want you to be terribly alarmed at this point, because we're going to be doing other steps on these lanterns that will help to provide you better coverage. But just getting this base coat on here is all we need to do at this point. And this one's going to keep getting reshaped because I keep bumping the edge out here. There we go, that's better. And then I'm using a good amount of paint. So don't be shy with the quantity of paint. It's going to be a while before we touch these again, so you'll have ample time to have them dry. You just want to, again, make sure that you get all the way to the edge of your pencil mark. So if you have to go a little bit slower as you're going along those edges, just take your time. There's no hurry. And like I see that I have a little bit of pencil showing on that upper corner, which I'm actually probably just going to erase because I don't want to bring, it looks like it's too far outside of where I want it to go. So I will actually erase that once my paint has dried. So you can do that too. If you don't get it all the way to the edge, or if you find yourself wanting to reshape it during this painting process and you still have a little of your pencil marks showing on the exterior, you can certainly, wait for your paint to dry, and then you can erase any of those little pencil marks that might still be evident outside of your colored part. And then once I've got this one done, again, I'm not doing anything fancy with my brush stroke, just making sure I have a nice good coverage. I will go ahead and paint this one in, and just making sure I have a good amount of paint so I can get good coverage. But again, I know that my paint is going to be on the see-through side, so I will be able to see my pencil underneath, which I am okay with because I've got those future steps that are going to help me cover it. And again, if you want to do your lanterns another color, oh my God, these lanterns, they're just so beautiful. They come in all different colors. I did have the pleasure of seeing the origin of these lanterns when I was in Asia a couple years ago. We got to go down these beautiful alleyways that just had these lanterns all adorning all the little market shops, and they're just beautiful. I think the typical color is red, but they have them in all colors of the rainbow. So if you have a favorite color that is not red, or that you'd like to incorporate in these, feel free to do so, because you would definitely still be doing these beautiful lanterns justice, even if you have them in a color other than red. And then we are going to be using our small brush for the next step. So once you've got your base coat of the paper part of the lanterns on here, you can put your medium brush away, take out your small brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to be doing the first layer of the lantern decorations. So I'm going to use my small brush, and I'm going to be using brown, white, yellow, and red are going to be my colors. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little decorative piece at the top and the bottom of each lantern, and I'm going to go for a color that resembles gold for me. So in order for me to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of my yellow, a little bit of brown, and a little bit of white, and I'm going to spin it together. I'm going for something like that color. The brown and yellow mixed together really gives you a nice natural, like the metallic gold type color, and the white added in there is going to help to make it so it is not too translucent. So it adds to the opacity of it. So once I've got my color, I think I actually need a little bit more to cover the areas that I want. So I just want to make sure I have enough paint to do what I'm looking to do. Once I've got the desired color, just tweaking it a little bit more here. So this is where I'm going with my color. Once I've got that in play, I am going to be making my little decorative pieces on the top and the bottom. So you can have these, one at the top is smaller, one at the bottom is bigger. You can have them the same size, whatever you feel is appropriate works for me. So I'm going to make myself a vertical line on the left and on the right of wherever I want these little pieces to be. And I'm trying to keep them equal distance away from the edge of that particular object. And then if I have a curve here, maybe you give it a little bit of a curve at the top as well. Again, just to show that it is of a similar shape and bring it right to the paper part of the lantern. I'm going to have this bottom one a little bit bigger. So again, I'm just doing these vertical lines on the left and the right, and then I will connect the top or the bottom respectively with whatever directional type line I want. It could be a straight line, it could be have a little bit of a curve to it like I'm giving mine. Whatever, again, is visually appealing for you works. These are decorations, so they could be built in different ways. They don't have to be exactly the same. So I'm just making sure I've got mine the way that I want it. Just tweaking it a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit there. I'm going to go ahead and I'll do this one over here. So again, I want to make sure that I have my two vertical lines like this. And then I've got my horizontal line, be it straight or with a little bit of a curve. These almost look like ornaments to me with these little toppers and the bottoms to them. So they're just beautiful, and you can make them in whatever way you'd like to. I think I'm going to have this bottom one a little bit wider. So my vertical lines like this, and then my horizontal line. So I have a shaky hand, if you can't detect that as I'm painting. So what I do to help rectify that little bit of an issue that I have, I rest my pinky or my hand on either my canvas or my easel. So right now I have my pinky on my easel, or my pinky on my canvas, and my palm is rested on my easel. So if you suffer from the same shaky hand that I do, that's my way to rectify it. So I'm going to go ahead and do this one on this large one. I'm going to do a smaller top. So my top is going to be maybe about 2 inches wide on this one, or 1.5 to 2 inches maybe. And maybe I'll make this one a little bit taller too, because this is a bigger lamp. So something like this. And again, I'm just coloring it in with this golden color. I'm using a good amount of paint on my brush right now because I know that again, it'll be a little while before we add the details to this. So just using a good amount of paint is going to give me good coverage, and I won't have to put another coat to cover it. We'll be doing our highlights and our shadows to give it dimension, but if you can utilize a good amount of paint on this first pass, that will help your job, or help make your job a little bit easier on the future pass. So this one down below, I'm going to go a little bit wider than the top one. So again, just doing my vertical line, trying to keep it spaced equally to what I have up top. And then I'm going to go ahead and give it a little bottom's edge. This one's going to go have some of its decorative detail in front of the branch, which is going to look super cool. And I'm going to go ahead and add this. And then once I've got the top and bottom sections, I'm going to wash and dry this little brush to do the first layer on there's a couple other little decorative elements that we've got to put a first coat to. So let me just wash, and I think I've got all of these in place. They look great. I'm going to wash and dry my little brush, and I'm going to add brown to my brush. So I washed and dried. I'm adding brown. This is going to start my little hanger piece. So I'm really just going to do a upside down U like this from one corner to the next. I'm going to give it a string that goes up to the tree branch and just give it a little curved piece up at the top. where it wraps around the branch. We'll put a highlight on it later, so if it doesn't look totally awesome right now, don't worry about it. I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to do a U, and because we have different shaped lanterns, these don't have to be exactly the same from one to the next. So you can certainly keep the diversity by just making everyone a little bit different. Maybe one of the U's is a little bit taller than the other one. Maybe one's a little bit shorter, which makes it look a little bit wider. And then again, I'm just kind of giving my rope, making sure it goes over, or hook, whatever you want to refer to this as, making sure it went over the branch. And then I'll go ahead and do this last one over here. I got to kind of center myself a little bit so I make it symmetrical from one side to the next. So you can always kind of start up at the top center part. There we go. And then just kind of pick yourself a center part and travel up into the tree. So something like this. We're going to have to put some hardy blossoms around here, so it makes sure that this branch looks like it can hold this big lantern. Good thing the lantern's made out of paper, because I've got my biggest one on the skinniest part of my branch. But I will put some nice hardy blossoms, and in my head I'm thinking it's a paper lantern. It's nice and lightweight anyways. So once I've got that, I don't need to wash my brush. I've got brown on it right now. I'm going to also pick up red, and what I'm going to do is I'm starting my little tassel thing that's coming down below. So I have red and brown on my brush right now, and I'm going to give myself a vertical line. Maybe, I don't know, you can pick your own distance here. I'm going to do a little, like a circle at some point, and then I'll just pull down these little fringes at the bottom. So again, this is red and brown that I have on my brush right now. I'm doing a vertical line that's maybe a couple of inches, 2 to 3 inches. Then I do a little circle, just a little, like a little knot or a button kind of part. And then I pull out some little fringes coming from there. And of course you can tweak this and make it more detailed, but we're going to be doing more details later. This is just the starting point. So maybe this one's going to be a little bit shorter. Maybe I get this one to have its little buckle part or knot right in through there. And then I'm going to pull down my little fringes in through here. And then we are going to be using our large brush for the next step. So once you've got your first layer of your lantern details or your lantern little decorations, you can put your small brush away, take out your large brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we are doing the first layer of our flower blossoms. I'm going to be using my large brush, and I'm going to be using red and white paint. So what I'm going to do is I am going to be making a dark pink and a lighter pink. So I've got my red, and I'm just separating a little bit. I'm picking up a little bit of white, and I'm just spinning it together. So I want this to be lighter than red, but darker than pink, like the traditional light pink. So I'm gonna go somewhere in this vicinity with my tone. And what I'm gonna do with that is I'm going to start my blossoms with dots. So I'm gonna build my blossoms from dark to light, so this way they really look three-dimensional. So we're starting with my darkest pink, and I don't need it to be everywhere. I would still want to see some of my branches through there. We are going to be putting on more detailed little petals later, so just know it might not look totally awesome after this step, but this is my building process for my cherry blossoms. So I've got my dark pink, and what I'm going to do is I'm not pressing hard. I'm just in essence, kind of giving myself little sections where I want these bursts of the blossoms to be. They don't all just have to be at the end of every branch. You can certainly put some in the middle of a branch if you want to. So feel free to kind of put them wherever you'd like them to be. I think I want a little bit coming off in through here, and you can see I didn't even have a branch there. So I'm just putting a little blossom area over there because I think I felt like it wanted it. And then I'm going to just kind of keep adding these areas of blossoms where I really want there to be these pops of the pink. And again, it doesn't have to be at the end of every branch. You can certainly skip a branch here or there, or leave the little ends popping through. And I'm gonna go ahead and put these everywhere. I want to have a big explosion up at the top. I want to have little pops in through here, and then I'm going to have a whole bunch over here on the right hand side. And again, I am just doing almost little clusters of this darker pink, and in a second I'm going to do one more tone of it, which is going to be on the lighter side. Don't forget your little branch down in through here. So I've got a little bit of that darker color on my brush, the darker pink on my brush right now, and I'm just kind of getting them in through here. That's looking pretty good to me. So now I'm going to, without washing my brush, I'm going to pick up a little bit more white and just mix it in with the whatever of that darker pink I had left. So this is going to give me a shade or two lighter of pink, and this is going to help again with that three-dimensional aspect of these flowers. So again, I'm going to go back into the same clusters, but when I do this second dotting, I'm not covering up all of that original dark pink. This is just going to be an additional color added in there to add to that dimensional element for them. So I am just adding some additional areas for our blossoms to blossom right out of our beautiful cherry tree. So I've got this going on, and then once I've got this all done, I'm going to be switching back to my medium brush. So once you've got this first step accomplished for your beautiful cherry blossoms, you can put the large brush away wherever you'd like to, and you can take out your medium brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we are putting the light in our lanterns. So I'm going to use my medium brush. I'm going to be using white, yellow, and red. And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to start with yellow to add almost like the glow inside of the lantern, and then I'll get that glow to blend into the exterior red, and then we'll come through and we'll put a nice bright pop of a light on the inside. So I'm going to start with just yellow paint on my brush. I'm going to have my lights a little off center. You can certainly put yours wherever you'd like to, but I'm going to kind of put mine a little bit off center, so somewhere like this, and then like this. And then as the paint is drying, I'm just going to kind of rub it out into the exterior red. So again, as my paint is drying, I'm just rubbing it into the exterior red, trying to keep the bright, or the most, the area with the most yellow is in a central type location. And as it blends out into the red, if I need to, like I feel like I'm going to need to on this one, I'm going to pick up, without washing my brush, a little bit of red to make sure that oops, I went out into my sky, or out into my, I guess this lantern is growing again. I'm going to get that yellow to make sure that it blends in with the exterior red. So you might end up having to do a little bit of blending just to make sure it does exactly what you want it to. I think I want another layer of my red on the exterior here too. Or you can just utilize the red to make sure that you have a good second coat on the lantern. You might have areas that are a little bit thinner in paint, and you can detect your brush strokes, and if you don't If that's not appealing to you, you can certainly add some more. I want a little more yellow in the center of here. And you might find that this is a bit of a building process, just so you can get that intensity of the light the way that, again, is visually appealing to you, or is in a way that is definitely nice and evident, because these paints, especially before we start using the white, they do tend to dry a little bit darker than they are when they're wet. So you might find that you can detect that over here. This is dry and you can hardly see that yellow anymore. So I'm going to actually add a little bit more of the yellow onto here just to make sure that it is visible, because there's no sense in putting it there if you can't see it. And then what I'm doing is I'm just kind of rubbing it out, making sure that it is going to blend in with that red. And I'm using like the side of my brush right now and almost a circular type brush stroke. And what I'm doing with this is manipulating that paint as it's drying, and it's allowing it to blend into the surrounding paint and get a little bit thinner. And I just picked up my red like I did on the other ones along that exterior, just to make sure it's blending in well with the yellow and that I have a nice full coverage. So yellow to start, blend it in with your red, and now that I've got the yellow started, now I want to put in a nice little bright white, it doesn't have to be bright white, but definitely a nice little glow. So if you have a lot of red on your brush, just quickly wash and dry the brush. I'm going to start with a touch of white on my brush, and you can certainly go in whatever order you want, but the white is a less is more kind of step. You don't need a big, huge glob of it. Just use a little bit at a time and just add to it. And it's going to be a combination of white and yellow that'll get this glow to happen, or the real bright part of it. So I've got a little bit of white on my brush, something like that. Now I'm picking up a touch of yellow, and you can use a little dotting technique, you can use a little rubbing technique, whatever works for you to manipulate that glow so it in essence blends into the rest of the lantern. I want mine to look like the glow is coming from behind the paper, so I want it to have this almost a real subtle effect to it. So I am slowly just getting that light to emerge, and that's looking pretty to me. So I'm just going to move on to the next one, putting a tiny bit of white paint on my brush. This one I think I'm going to have somewhere in this vicinity. And if you feel like you have too much paint, like I feel like I have too much paint right now, I'm just going to take my brush, wipe it off on my paper towel. And as that white is drying, I just picked up a little bit of yellow, and I'm going to get the edges of that light source to blend in with the surrounding paper on the lantern. So again, this might be one of those steps that takes you a few tries to get it the way that you want it. But once you've got it, it really adds this beautiful effect to them. It gives them a lot of dimension, and that's looking pretty good to me in through there. So I'm gonna, I think, move right on to my next one. Yeah, that's pretty. So again, just starting with a little bit of white, picking my area that I wanna have that glow happening. And this one, of course, I can have a little bit bigger because it is a bigger lantern. I'm picking up a little bit of yellow now just to make sure that my light inside my lantern blends with the surrounding area. And I'm using that same kind of dabbing, rubbing type technique just to get it to blend in. And then we are going to be using our small brush for the next step. So once you've got your light in your lanterns, you can wash and dry your small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we are finishing the paper part of our lanterns. This is going to be with a shadow and the little creases in the paper. So I'm going to be using my small brush, and I'm going to be using brown and red paint. And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to do my shadows first. So I just picked up some brown paint. I'm having my shadows on the bottom left-hand side. So what I'm going to do is I'm in essence going to just kind of outline this left-hand side of my lantern, the bottom and the left. So something like this. Once I've got that outline on there, I just wipe my brush off on my paper towel and pick up a little bit of red, and I can get that shadow to just blend in with the red area of the lantern. So this way it gives it just a nice natural little shadow on this left-hand side. So I just wiped my brush off on my paper towel. I picked up some more brown. So I'm going to go on the left-hand side with just a brown line. And it can be on the thinner or the thicker side, whatever is visually appealing to you. The thicker it is, the more kind of a dimensional element you will be adding to. It'll make it have more shape. So I just put my brown. Now I am not washing my brush and picking up red just to make sure that shadow blends in with the actual paper of the lantern, the red color of it. There we go. And I'm going to repeat that step over here, only this one's probably going to be a larger area because the lantern is a little bit larger. So I'm going to go over on this left hand side. And if your lanterns were darker than mine, you might end up being able to get away with using a little bit of black as well on your shadow. So don't feel that you just have to use brown. You might be able to get away with a little bit of black as well. So once I've got my brown on there, I'm just picking up some red paint to make sure that it just blends in a little bit here. So brown first and then the red to get the two colors to blend in with one another. And then I will pick up, once I've got the shadow on, I'm going to pick up a touch of brown to make my creases in my paper. So I'm thinking I want to maintain the illusion that these have shape to them. So my lines are going to have curves to them. So how I'm going to start this is I'm going to start it in the center with a straight line, especially the rounder objects. I'll do something a little bit different for this one, but I'm going to start in the center like this with just a line, and this line can be a little translucent. It doesn't have to be 100% thick because it can have variations of it being dark and light. So once I've got that done, then I'm just going to start making these curved lines that are going to give the illusion of shape for my object. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the right hand side. And if you don't want these little creases in the paper to be too bold, you can also use a little bit of water on your brush as you're performing this step. That will make that brown a little bit more translucent. And then I'm going to go ahead and do this one. This one I'm going to have my curve of my object up at the top, but I'm still going to start with a straight line down the center. So I just have brown on my brush, and I'm bringing this right down the center. And then when I go to do the other ones, I'm going to give it just a little bit of a bend at the top, come straight down, and a little bend at the bottom. And then I'm going to do that for the left side, and I'm only going to do maybe 3 or 4 going down each side. So straight down, and then a little curve or a bend at the top or the bottom, top and the bottom, something like this. And these creases in essence come together where we have those decorative elements at the top and the bottom. So just keep that in mind, and you'll be able to execute these where they are meant to be. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing over on this side. And I'm using a good amount of paint on my brush, so that way it stays pretty fluid throughout my singular brush stroke. So if the more paint you have on your brush, you'll be able to get a longer brush stroke. However, if you don't want your line to be too thick, you just got to be mindful to not press too hard if you have a lot of paint on your brush. And then I think that's it for this one. And then I just have my final one over here, and it's going to be the same process. I'm going to start with that vertical line just going down the center. I'm going to try and not knock my wine with my elbow or get in front of the camera here. So for me, I'm at a little bit of an angle over here, but I can see if I keep my eye here and just keep my brush going towards this target, I should stay pretty much in the center. So I like to, what I refer to as, keep my eye on the prize. That is a good way for me to make sure that I get things going in the proper direction. And then again, I'm going to start this with a little bit of a curve to give the illusion of this being a curved object. And I see that I'm going to be going through wet paint right now. I didn't know if it was going to cause me a bald spot. Sometimes when you paint over a wet spot like that, it ends up giving you a little bald spot in your canvas, but it didn't. So we are safe. And I've just got a couple more over on the right hand side. So I've got, again, still just brown paint. And I'm doing this an equal number of stripes from one side to the other. I suppose if you were looking at the lantern from a different angle, maybe you have more coming from one side than the other, but I'm trying to keep mine pretty equal. And then we're going to use this same brush for the next step. So once you've got your creases in your paper lantern, you can wash and dry this small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're finishing the details on our lantern decoration. So the hangers and the fringe and all that good stuff, that's what we're going to do now. I'm going to use my small brush. The colors that I'm using are brown, yellow, white, and red. And you might, if you want your shadowy areas again to be a little bit more intense, you could use a little bit of black as well. So what I'm going to do is I am starting with some brown paint on my small brush, and I'm going to put my shadows into place on these gold pieces that are adorning the top and the bottom. So I'm going to put a brown line on the left, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just pulling that paint over towards the right, and you can keep it in if you have a curved type object, you can use your brush stroke in a curved type line, which again will give the viewer the information that it is in fact a curved object. We can steer the viewer to believe stuff just by putting a directional brush stroke into play. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing up here. I've got my shadow on this left hand side, maybe a little bit on the bottom of that object as well, and then I'm just lightly pulling that paint over to the right hand side with a bit of a curve to steer the viewer into understanding that it is a round object. This might have a little bit of extra shadow underneath the lantern itself, as well as maybe down below here, because that's the underside. So if you feel that you want a little extra shadow under there, go ahead and put it. And then I'm going to just pull, I just had to wipe my brush off on my paper towel. I had a little bit too much paint on there. Just pull this over with a little bit of a curving type brush stroke. And then I'll do the same thing over here. Sometimes when I'm doing these steps and it's the same step from one object to the next, I feel like I'm washing my hair. You wash it and then you rinse and you repeat. So we're doing it on one, and then we're rinsing and repeating and doing it on the next object the same way. So again, I just put my wet line on the left, and then I'm just pulling that paint over in almost a little bit of a curved type brush stroke. I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to put this left line on here. I'm going to put one underneath this big ball lantern just to give that the optical illusion that the lantern itself is casting a little bit of a shadow on this piece as well. And this is a great step to clean up any lines that you might not have executed as well as you wanted to. And then I will take this and I will pull this paint over from the left in a little bit of a curved type of brush stroke. And then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to add my highlights onto these sections. So I'm just going to wash and dry my brush, and my highlight is going to come from that right hand side. So I'm going to start with a little bit of white paint, and the highlight does not necessarily have to be at the edge. It can be in a little bit from that right edge. So you could in essence kind of put your bright spot in through there and then just pull it to the left and a little bit to the right, and that will give you again that illusion that it is a round type object. So, or you could just sit in a spot like this and just pull a little bit to the left and a little bit to the right. And I'm going to do that on all of them. So just a little mark in through there, and then just pull it to the left a little bit and a little bit to the right, adding that bit of a curve to the brush stroke if you have a big enough area to do so. And in through here, I can do the same thing. When it's in a bigger area, you can get away with just kind of swishing your brush left to right like this. And if you can get it to be the brightest in you know, that central area, that would be great. And then of course I'm going to do the same thing over in through here, decide where I want it to go. And something like this, leaving that edge a little bit darker. And if you've done too much, don't hesitate to pick back up some of your original gold. You can certainly reincorporate that into it if you feel like you've made it too light, or you know, or if you made your shadow too dark, you can certainly bring back some of that original gold color that you had. And I'm going to do the same thing down in through here, put my bright area in through there, and then just kind of pull it out into the gold. And then I'm going to add a little bit of a highlight on my string, or my whatever the hook part is that's holding the lantern up. So this you can use a combination of white and or brown, or just white, depending on how intense you want it to be. Right now I just have white paint on my brush, and I'm just really going to add a little simple streak throughout this hanger, just again to give it that three-dimensional look to it, to tell the viewer that it's not just a flat object. And again, you could certainly add a bit of brown if you needed to. If you felt like you made it too bright, you could certainly bring back some of that brown. So again, just a little streak of white is really all I'm doing on these. And it doesn't even have to be solid. It doesn't have to be executed where it's uniform through the whole thing. Just a bit of a highlight is all you need. And then I just have my little fringes to go down at the bottom. So I'm going to be using red and yellow for my fringe. That's going to come out the bottom of this section here. So I've just got a little bit of red on my brush right now, and then I did a little wet line, and you can even use a bit of water on your brush if you feel like you want these to have a little bit more movement. The water is going to help you to make them have different translucency to them, so you might be able to see through some of them. So that's my red. I'm picking up some yellow right now. And again, you could have yours white, you could have yours whatever color you want. You could have brown fringe, you could have blue fringe, but I'm just going to go with the typical what I was seeing, which is the red and the white. So again, I'm just adding a bit of fringe in through here. So just adding my wet line of red. And then I'm going to take it and I'm going to pull some red streaks down, and they can be even at the bottom, they can be uneven, whatever again is visually appealing to you. I'm keeping mine a little bit shy of where that knot is, so we can keep that as a visual element to it. And when I'm doing these red stripes, I'm not covering the area 100% because I want you to have the thought or the illusion that these are just little pieces of string coming down. You could even incorporate a little bit of white if you felt like there wasn't enough of a dimensional element to it. You could have a little bit of white or a little bit of brown in there as well. That will help to make them look like there's highlights and shadows throughout them. This one's going to have short fringe because I have a short little stem underneath here, which is totally cool because it adds that bit of diversity to it. So again, I added that red line at the top, and now I'm just kind of pulling down some little pieces of cloth string fringes, and now I'm going to add a bit of yellow into it. And again, if your yellow is not evident as much as you want it to, you can certainly add a bit of white, which I'm just going to show you what something like that would do. It's going to add that extra little punch. And you could also, if you felt like the bottom fringe that we did earlier was not punching enough for you, is not evident enough for you, you could certainly add to that at this point too. You could add more red to it, you could add more brown to it, you could add a little bit of a shadow underneath that knot if you wanted to. And then we are going to be changing to our medium brush for the next step. So once you've got all of your little details on your lantern finalized, you can wash and dry your medium brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we are finishing our flower blossoms. So I'm going to use my medium brush, and I'm going to be using red and white. So I'll be using some variation of pink and white. And I will also be using a little bit of brown and or black at the end, because these flowers have little dots in the middle of them, which I won't put it on all of them, but just a couple of them. So these flowers they can be really big, they can be small, they can come in all different sizes. What I did find was, I think the typical kind of cherry blossom flower has 5 petals to it, but they grow in these clusters, which is why I kind of did these bulk areas for it. So I'm not terribly concerned about making singular flowers that show 5 petals on each flower. I'm really just interested in giving the impression of the flower blossom flower for it. So I'm gonna make a couple really distinct ones with those 5 petals, and then the rest is going to be a little bit more intuitive and interpretive on my part. So I'm going to start with white and some of my lighter pink on my brush at the same time. And I'm going to start with the ones that I'm going to call in focus, or more that you're going to be able to detect the shape of them. And I'm just going to put a few of those sporadically, and then once I've got those on there, I'm just going to freeform and have fun with the rest of them. So I'm going to have maybe one in through here. So my idea is I'm going to put them on top or intermingled with that base that we already have. So that way it gives it a really nice element to it. These ones I'm going to have maybe a couple of small ones. Maybe I've got a couple in through. I think I want a little bit more pink on my brush. So the white is going to really act as a beautiful highlight for these. And I'm just doing 5 of these petals for these ones that I'm going to call in focus. But very soon, because I'm getting a little restless at the moment, I really just want my brush to go blah, 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 blah. But I'm slowing down and giving you a couple that are definitely those 5 little petals, but you can have them really big, you can have smaller ones, they can be at different angles. I'm using both pink and white on my brush at the same time, which is providing me with a great, almost like a textural effect for the petals themselves. So you can utilize, like right there, I had both the pink and the white on my brush at the same time, and it provides you with a really easy way to give that the look of a three-dimensional petal, because you've got the different tones within that one petal. So I've got a few that are representational of the actual shape. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to let my brush kind of take over, because I'm feeling like I really need to do that right now. So I've got some in through here, and now I'm just going to kind of give myself some maybe little cup ones, almost like they're looking like little like lotus type flowers. Maybe I'll have one of those here. I like the effect that that just gave. And if you run out of pink, or if you want to go more into the darker colors, these blossoms can be on the whiter side or on the pinker side. So these ones I'm doing right now are almost like in a little cup, like upward type motion, which to me is looking pretty cool. So I'm gonna make a couple more of those. And then yeah, I like that one. That one's, it's almost like we're looking at it from the side, but I don't want to do 100% of all the same angle for the flowers. So right now I'm just kind of doing little petals that we're seeing from the side or whatnot, and I'm just kind of letting my intuition kick in right now with where I want some of these to be. And this is looking fun to me. I'm gonna have some more down in through here. The white really helps to make the illusion of sunshine hitting these. Some of the cherry blossom trees are almost, they have just white blossoms on them. A lot of them are pink, but they definitely do have some that have more of the whiter elements to them. So right now I'm doing some dots and dashes and just adding these little, maybe I've got some little tiny petals in through here. Maybe this one is going to come in front of that particular little string. And I want to make sure that I've got enough in here that disguises some of that original texture that we did. So this way they all look like they're kind of connected. I don't want to have a big spot in through here that looks one way and then a distinct leaf right next to it. So you want to make sure that you've got each element almost overlapping one another and connected to one another, so they look like they're on the same tree and that we're just seeing stuff from a different angle. And that will again help with the illusion of the dimensional element to it. And I suppose you could add regular leaves to the tree, like green leaves. I know that, again, these trees, the blossoms take over. I think that's why they're such a popular tree, because, I mean, the blossoms just explode. They're huge, they take over, there's just so many of them. This is looking pretty good. I am just putting my head back for a moment here, making sure that I've got as much on here as I want, because we have the little tiny centers that we're going to put on in a second as well. So just making sure I've got enough dots and dashes that look like little petals in my head. And then once I've got enough on here, yeah, this is a couple more down in through here. Once I feel like I've got enough of these beautiful little pops of color, and that it looks like these petals are almost jumping right out of my canvas. Again, the white is the color that will help you get these to really pop out of your canvas. So if you're looking at it and you're like, well, the shapes are good and the flowers look nice, but it's not popping enough to you, that means that you probably need a little bit more contrast in your colors. So either go a little bit with a little bit darker of the pink or more pops of the white. And then once you've got enough on here and you're feeling like they're connected well and you've got enough diversity throughout the tree, then what I'm going to do is I'm just wiping my brush off on my paper towel and I'm picking up a touch of brown and maybe a little bit of black, not much, and I'm going to sporadically just put in these little tiny dots that might be in the center of some of those ones that I placed earlier that were in focus. So if you find a couple that you feel you might want to have a little center to them, feel free to just kind of pop it in. And again, I'm not using much on my brush, just a tiny bit of black and brown. Maybe there's a little bit more up in this corner here. And then we have one tiny little step left to go. Oh, that's looking so pretty. I'm itching for some springtime. If you saw outside my window right now, there's almost a blizzard going on. So I'm really excited that I got to paint some spring blossoming flowers today. But we do have one tiny little step left to go, and it's going to be with your small brush. So once you've got all of your beautiful blossoms in place, you can wash and dry your small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so we are on to the final step. This is the final step of every painting, which is to sign it. So I'm going to use my small brush. I'm going to use black paint. I'm going to sign this one in the bottom left corner. I usually sign it bottom left or bottom right. You can really sign it wherever you'd like to. I sign mine with my initials, but you could certainly sign yours with a symbol or with the date or with your whole name or your first name. Whatever you want to be your identifying mark is totally up to you. It is your painting. And that is going to conclude this painting. I hope you enjoyed the process. I hope you painted yourself a pretty blossoming, vibrant image, and I look forward to painting and sipping with you again sometime.